everybody? What's going on? This is Purple Update Live. Instant reaction to the post game of the Vikings and Lions. The Vikings end up being victorious over the Lions in a pretty stress-free game, winning 20-7. Giving up a garbage time touchdown late, and almost pitching a shutout against these Lions, which, not to diminish it whatsoever, because I'll get into this, but I think it was a huge game. But that's what you would expect, right? At this point, with what the team has invested in its defense, what its philosophy as a team is, what the expectations are, which I'll talk about as well, for this franchise. They needed this win, and they needed to win it in the way that they did. Now, I'm writing an article yet again about Cousins, and the way I explain it is that I really try, as a writer myself, and as an owner of a site, when we get new writers, to really write about things that I'm passionate about, but also that I think are dictated by you guys, like the zeitgeist of the Vikings, what topics are popular, what I see in the comment section, what I see on social media. And a lot of that is Cousins based. And the article that I'm writing really is just, at this point, in my life, at 35 years old, we've never had a stable franchise quarterback. And I understand that people, for that reason, were emotionally attached to Teddy Bridgewater, and they loved him, and then they loved Keenum because of what happened in 2017. But I just feel like at this point there should, you don't have, and this, I'm not saying that he's as good as Aaron Rodgers, because he's not. He hasn't proven it. He hasn't won on the level that Rodgers has won. But teams with franchise quarterbacks, you don't hear that. You don't hear people, outside of the crazies, saying, well, why is this person starting? Or why are we paying them? Or why are we extending them? It's kind of a implied realism. So I think we're at that point with Cousins. I think that regardless of whether or not you think he deserves the yards that he gets, or that he gets them in garbage time, or he doesn't beat anybody of consequence, he's winning games, and he's doing it with the skill around him, and he's doing it up until this point with really middling defense at best. And so, and what's weird about the defense is they're statistically becoming more and more mediocre, or they were. But it's really the tale of two defenses. Like, they looked really good the first quarter of the season, almost the anti-2018, where they were bad to start the season, then they kind of figured it out, but they weren't great. They were good to start the season this year, and they kind of fell apart, but they really looked good today, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. But, yeah, this is why it's so frustrating to lose against a Chase Daniel or Matt Moore, because this is what an elite defense is supposed to do against a rookie quarterback or a backup quarterback. And granted, those other two backups weren't rookies, and they weren't undrafted rookies, but, right? So, before the game, I really wanted to have a bounce-back game from the defense in regards to the run, the rush defense, and the defense in general, the secondary, and I was happy about that. I think they ended up giving up on the ground about 70 yards, which is good. The stat before the game that I shared was that if the 3 times the Vikings have given up over 130 yards on the ground, they've lost. So they gave up half that, about half that. Which is good. 3.4 yards a carry to Bo Scarborough, but they were really shutting down the run early. And I think, obviously, they're undefeated at home. That helped. I think it helped to have Rhodes on the sideline for a lot of it, especially early. I'm going to look at what his snap count was, but the other thing I really wanted was for them to um, start playing Hughes and some Holton Hill too, in a trial by fire sort of deal, because either Hughes is going to play in the playoffs, or it's going to be some mixture of Hughes and Rhodes, a stronger mixture than we've had. And I made a lot of arguments about that, basically saying, I know that it takes a few years for corners to learn Zimmer's system in the best circumstances. Tearing your ACL hurts, but it did give him a lot of time to delve into the playbook. Granted, that doesn't supplant being on the field and learning it on the fly. So I'm not surprised that he's been up and down, but at the same time, if your strength is your secondary and that's what your coach is known for, you really should at this point, even though it takes about a year to come back from an ACL, be treating Hughes as if it's his first game or something. You spent a first round pick on a guy instead of getting interior offensive linemen, which ends up basically ruining your 2018 season, one of 3 that you have with a quarterback who at the time was on the most expensive contract of all time. That's a pretty, I mean, they gave up a whole season for that. And so I don't really want to hear that, well, Hughes, it's only his X amount game. If he, and I said this before the game, if he is worse, or if you don't trust him to do better than Rhodes, as bad as Rhodes played on Monday night, then you shouldn't have drafted him in the first place. And so I was glad to see him out there. I was glad to see him doing well. It was extremely encouraging to me. And in retrospect, this was the perfect example or timing to do that. You had David Blau, who, again, is an undrafted free agent rookie. He did look pretty good out of the gate on Thanksgiving, but this is the NFL, and if you can't stop him, especially based on what I just said, if Hughes struggles in that regard, that's an issue as well. Now, granted, the Lions do have really good wide receivers, and in a perfect world, you would love to have like a 2017 era Rhodes out there because he's big, he's long, and he's physical, and that's really what, especially Marvin Jones Jr. is all about. So, it was just a really encouraging game. I mean, in regards to the defense as well, just the amount of sacks that they had, both from pressure from the defensive ends. We've talked a lot on the show about that, and how Everson Griffin and Danielle Hunter were 2-1 in the league in regards to pressures, but those weren't really materializing into sacks more and more. Some of that was due to the ability of quarterbacks to get rid of the ball quickly because the secondary was garbage. Some of that was from a lack of interior pressure and quarterbacks stepping up into the pocket. That didn't really happen today. I mean, you saw Danielle Hunter, I'm going to see from the box score how many sacks he ended up with, but you also saw sacks from Jaleel Johnson on the interior. And it was just, a fully rounded defensive win. There wasn't really a whole lot of negativity or negative plays. Hunter ended up with 4. Everson Griffin got 1. Jaleel Johnson got 1. So that's 5 on the day. I'll take that. It's huge. I don't know this for sure, but that feels like more than they've had in the last couple of weeks combined. So that's an extremely vague statement, but I'll take it. I'm very happy about the 50-yard field goal from Dan Bailey. He missed the extra point Monday night. And quick story, I had a former writer of ours wrote an article that had some wrong information about Bailey, about his biography, and it also was kind of negative about him, about his play. But then it also had something wrong about his biography. Now, in that writer's defense, everywhere you go, like if you type in biography of a famous person, there's these websites that talk about like their net worth and their history. I found like the top 6 of those all had that information wrong. There wasn't updated information. But that email came from someone within Bailey's family, and it was a really good insight into, I think, how he felt about things, because they were talking about how hard it is for a kicker to adjust when things are constantly changing. The long snapper, the holder, that, like from snap to kick, it's like 1.3 seconds. And while the kicker gets the blame, it's the holder that can really screw things up. It was his mom that emailed me, and it really, and I mean this facetiously, but it felt kind of like Ace Ventura laces out, because she had some very specific thoughts on the state of the Vikings kicking game. And I had told her that I was a big supporter of Bailey's, and that because of the way that, my degrees weren't in journalism, sports journalism or journalism in general, a political science major and a sociology of law, criminology and deviance major. So I really learned a lot about sports journalism from Joe Oberly, and how to do things right and wrong, and especially if you want access to the team, which we've had a tremendous amount of. And one of those things was to really never call for people's jobs, especially out of anger, or someone has a bad game and they should cut them. These are real people with families and so on and so forth. So I've only really ever done that once, and it was in regards to Mike Prefer, the former special teams coach, and I used Bailey as really the canary in the coal mine there, and saying that, if Bailey, the guy who at the time was the second most accurate kicker in the history of the league, was struggling, then it's a problem. It's not just the other problem of maybe not identifying talent out of the draft in regards to Daniel Carlson or Blair Walsh. It's not just hubris in getting rid of Kai Forbath, who was maybe didn't hit his extra points on the level you would want, but he was clutch. He made the field goals that the Vikings typically kick, the under 50-yarders. Maybe kicked the most clutch field goal in my lifetime in regards to the field goal that no one really remembers, but the one that he kicked before overtime with the Saints, in the Saints game, rather. And so I have a lot of respect for Bailey, and I think that he's really come back from a bad season last year. I think that, again, going back, not to tie everything into Cousins, but there was just a lot going on last year. Last year was just a cluster, kicking game included. So I'm happy they kept him. I know that there was more changes with Vedvik, and seeing what he could do this preseason, but it's great to see him bounce back and hit that 50-yarder. Yes, Dan Bailey's mom emailed me. Ann Bailey. A while ago. This was around the time that the Vedvik stuff was going on, and it's been enough, and things are going well enough where I'm more open to talking about it. I didn't want to cause any additional stress, but essentially, the article was about Bailey, and it was done in kind of like how the newspaper does it. You break it up into sections, and it talked about his biography, and it just said that he married his college sweetheart in 2011. They've since gotten a divorce. But that wasn't anywhere on the internet. I could not find it. I just said he married his college sweetheart. Everyone just was copying and pasting the same thing. And the email was from Ann Bailey, and so I assumed it was his new wife, and she was kind of salty, like, why are you talking about his old wife? She's not around anymore. Because it was like, if you're going to be negative, at least get your facts straight, basically. And I was like, I'm really embarrassed. She goes, at least research your stuff. And it's like, we do a lot of research, and we fact check, and we edit each other's stuff. We have a process. It's not just random people from Twitter throwing up clickbait stuff, even though we hear that a lot. We try to follow a process. And so that was embarrassing. and I'm not putting her on blast for that. I completely understand why she did it. She was right to do it. And I think he was getting criticism on that he didn't deserve. I think, if anything, the number one thing your kicker needs is consistency. It's such a I mean, the most interesting thing about I've had Chris Cluey on my podcast, Morning Joe's, twice or three times maybe, and he talks about a lot of stuff. How he spent almost a year training for American Ninja Warrior, and he lasted like 6 seconds. I'm trying to find a clip of that. I would love to find that and send it to him and give him shit. He would actually like that. He said something to me that I found extremely interesting, and it's different for the Vikings now, but at the time this hadn't happened. So the Vikings have a kicking coach now, Nate Kading, the anti-clutch kicker from the that played for the Chargers primarily. I don't know if he's still there. I should look that up. I heard a lot about them bringing him in, and then I never heard another thing about it. But he essentially said that as a punter or a kicker in college, in high school, not a huge surprise, or the pros, there is nobody. If you're in a slump, there's no kicking coach. There's nobody that comes to you and says, okay, like a caddy would do in golf, this is why. Look at this video. Your point of contact with the ball is different, or your follow through is different, so on and so forth. You're really on your own in that regard. I think that is changing again with the cading thing and the NFL in general, and they can use AI to analyze kicking motion and so on and so forth. But it was astounding to me that something that is that important is really left just to the kicker to figure out. And if they want to bring in somebody to help them with that, they have to foot the bill themselves. That was just amazing to me. I had assumed that Prefer or somebody under him would go to the kicker and say, okay, like, this is what's going on. This is what we noticed. This is how you can fix things. No, they're really on an island by themselves. And then, sometimes they don't play. You don't see them for a long time, and then they come in, and it's up to them to win the game. It just seems like a very lonely and high pressure situation. So I always found that very, very interesting. Looking at some of your comments, says I like Cluey. Me too. A lot of people don't. I'm sure that's based on his politics. I like to separate a lot of that from this. I'm a political science major. It is a passion of mine. But unless it's something egregious, I try to just not focus on that. But I don't think that they had the right to tell him to stop doing what he believed in off the field, away from the team. Not to get into it too much, but, to answer this any question, why did we go for it on 4th and 2 midfield? Most likely because it was low risk in Zimmer's mind, to think that they haven't done anything to this defense all day. I want Zimmer to be more aggressive because I feel like I'm name dropping a lot on this episode, but the first episode I did of this show, I did with this guy named Brandon Lang, who is a betting guy, kind of a legend in the betting field, sports betting. There's a movie from 2006 called Two for the Money with Matthew McConaughey and Al Pacino, and Matthew McConaughey plays Brandon Lang. That's his name in the movie. It's about him. Now, some have said that movie's complete, and I think it might be based on a book, is bullshit, which would not surprise me. He's very East Coast type A, either alpha or faux alpha, and he talked a lot about why he never bets on the Vikings, and that's because he doesn't like Zimmer, and he doesn't like Zimmer because Zimmer plays not to lose as opposed to playing to win. And I think we saw that in Seattle on Monday night. I think when you change your scheme, and whether or not Zimmer, I mean, this isn't the best example because it was more of an offensive thing, but we've seen Zimmer change their scheme in big games against good opponents, especially against good opponents with offensive-minded head coaches. And to me, that's going away from what you're good at because maybe you don't think you're good enough to do it better than the other team is good at stopping that sort of thing. Seattle is good at stopping heavy personnel. They want to have 3 linebackers on the field. I get wanting to keep their nickel defense on the field as much as possible. But they just went away from what worked for them, and Zimmer does that a lot. And so I'm not gonna um, be upset that when your defense is playing lights out, that you go for it at the 50-yard line. And I'm not saying you're upset either, but I like to see some of that confidence from Zimmer because I'm not seeing a lot. I don't see a lot of that. Especially coming off of that Monday night game, seeing a confident move like that actually believes that your team is going to be able to do something, is a good sign to me. I mean, there's just a lot of good signs in this game, but you're playing the Bears. They have 3 wins. They have an undrafted rookie quarterback. You should have won this game. Should the offense have maybe put up some more points? Yes, but it just felt like a very relaxed sort of let's go in, let's win this game, and let's look forward to next week. Tank says, I don't know why they didn't target Rhodes more when he was on the field. I don't think, they always, whenever that happens, the announcers always talk about, well, that's a savvy veteran. Look at Aaron Rodgers picking on the rookie. When you're under that much pressure and the offense is still relatively new to you as an undrafted rookie quarterback, I don't think you have the ability to either get through your. I think you're really based. I think you really focus on how you practice these plays and saying, okay, this play, these are my progressions. And these progressions are, let's say, you have three wideouts and a check down. You can jump off to your fullback or something. You go, the receiver going across the field first. Then you check to see if the guy running just a quick button hook is open, so on and so forth. I don't think that you know the offense well enough or have had enough experience running these plays. I mean, he's running a lot of these plays for the first time. To say, I'm going to skip my progressions and solely focus and say, okay, that's where Rhodes is. I'm going to throw it to this guy. You know what I mean? I think that just takes, I don't think he's there yet. I mean, how many snaps has this guy played? I'm glad they didn't do that, I guess. But, I think that's why. All right, asked if they'll stay with the cover 2 if the secondary stays inconsistent. I'm not a huge X's and O's guy, and I'm not going to pretend to be. I think that going back to things that encouraged me in this game, as apparently my ceiling is caving in. My final words on this planet. Before the game, I talked about, okay, they can't fix the roads at this point. I don't think that Hughes has shown enough to really show that they can stick with the double-A gap man sort of stuff that they are known for primarily. I know Zimmer doesn't like to be labeled that because I think he's said that he's gone past it, and the team's gone past it, and he's not just a one-scheme guy. He's not Tampa 2 like Dungy was. And so I think that it's very encouraging to see that, again, starting the game with Rhodes on the sideline and limiting his play was huge. I hope it's based on his play and not his outburst. Although his outburst was because he was benched for a play. So there is that. They're kind of intertwined. Beyond that, I think it shows that he does understand that, a lot of people were saying, again, does he have the balls to bench Rhodes? Is he too proud? Is he too stubborn? We talked about this before the game. A lot of you guys heard that already. I think this showed, A, he's not too stubborn or too proud, and B, that he is aware of the problem on a level that maybe they can't fix it. Obviously, he's aware of the problem, but I think he's saying we have to scheme things differently because of it. And I think that is encouraging, and it shows us that, while, again, this isn't a powerhouse offense, this quarterback has, 2 games under his belt, 2 full games. It at least shows that maybe they have an answer to the problem, as opposed to just keep doing the same thing and hope, as fans, that the offense is going to be able to outscore the other team on the road in the playoffs. So, I mean, all around, it was an encouraging win. I'm very happy with it. I said before the game I wanted something on the level of the Raiders game that was just really low stress, and while it wasn't necessarily the offensive output of that game, it didn't need to be. I mean, we saw enough and the 49ers ended up winning over the Saints. That's big. Um, let's see. But Tank said there's only so much scheming you can do to cover the players' inconsistency, and that's true. And that's my main fear, and I haven't really verbalized that very well. But every time someone is asked, when things are good, every time someone is asked one of the core Vikings defensive players, especially in the secondary, why the defense works so well, or why does the unit work so well together, they'll say, because I know that I can focus on my assignment and I don't have to worry about the guy next to me at all, because I know he'll do the same thing. Because when you're worried about the other guy, you are all of a sudden not worrying just about what you're doing. You're worrying about covering for what he's doing. And you're thinking, well, I can't. Let's take the 60-yard pass from the Seattle game, the one that broke Rhodes' brain and apparently his ability to run more than 5 miles per hour. In that instance, perhaps, and it could have been right, but Harrison Smith, he's up at the line of scrimmage showing blitz, then he backs off to cover the tight end or the running back. To him, maybe he's thinking, well, Rhodes is behind me and he doesn't have any safety help over the top because I am the safety. Maybe I have to worry about that and keep my head over my shoulder. It's not the best example of a play because it ended up kind of not working that way. But in that instance, say Harrison Smith drops back, even though he's not supposed to, and then they pick up a massive first down on a screen or something. It's really kind of a house of cards when you think about it. And it works really well when it works well. But it's a really good example as to how one guy out of 11 can screw things up. And that was my concern. I think that doesn't necessarily change when you have a guy who's still, by all intents and purposes, a rookie in Hughes, and the guys around him not knowing him. I mean, there's also the aspect of knowing how the guy next to you plays, and having 10 of 11 starters return in the same system, new wrinkles, but same system this year. The 11th guy being a guy who's been on the team before. He was just in Seattle for a year. You just have that familiarity, and while that can breed complacency, which we saw in the preseason, that's not the problem with his defense. And so I have a feeling that when it comes to the Seattle game, and maybe the linebackers not doing that great in the run game. The interior defensive line wasn't doing great either, but the linebackers, Kendricks especially, might have been worrying about keeping an eye on Rhodes' assignment, which that just throws everything out of whack. And so maybe I don't know, man. I gotta be hopeful, right? I mean, what else do we have? Maybe the combination of changing up the scheme a little bit, doing more cover 2, and using Hughes, and maybe some more Holton Hill, because he's. The problem with Hughes, outside of his inexperience, is his size. I think he's very generous, 5'10". That's 5 inches shorter than Xavier Rhodes, and Rhodes is big. He's a big dude. Perfect world if you could put the knowledge needed to play outside corner into Curse's head, that'd be nice. Because he's such a large dude. But I mean, I guess the way to put a bow on that is I'm more encouraged about things right now than I was 4 hours ago. So we got that going for us. Look at some more comments. Kicking consultant, RN. Thanks for looking that up. You looked up the Nate Kading thing to see. I'm gonna look into that. Maybe write an article about it. RN says he fears a repeat of the Saints minus the miracle. I heard some of that in the live chat during the game, that people really don't want to play the Saints at home. I think it was Roger Deere, one of the writers, who said that. I'm going to ask you guys, and I'll scroll down to the bottom of the comments, as of right now, and I'll give you my answer, which team, if the Vikings made the NFC Championship and were playing on the road, which team would you want to play least? Like, what team do you fear the most in the NFC? Because that's a hard question to answer. Um, I thought it was the Seahawks. And then a couple weeks ago, and then I thought, well, they've done a really good job of stopping Russell Wilson in the past. Sure, they've lost 6 in a row now, but it's not It's not that. It hasn't been that dire. I mean, the 27-yard kick last year was the worst game in Russell Wilson's career. This year, they had the worst quarter of football you'll probably ever see in the third quarter, and they still almost pulled that one out. So I would say, I don't know. For me, I don't want to poison the well with your guys' answers. I want to see your answers first. I don't know. There's some sort of okay. RN says Seahawks. Tang, I don't know if you answered or not. Also, Tang, I made you a moderator. I don't know what that means. I don't know how that would work. A moderator, I think, maybe on YouTube. I don't know. So I did that because you're always here and you're gonna have a cool shirt coming your way if you email me, and also because if we get a troll in here, a Packers troll, or especially when the playoffs come, we tend to get trolls, and you'll be able to exercise your power that way. Randy says the 49ers. I will say, as a whole, the Ravens. I do not want to play the Ravens, period. I cannot imagine them not going to the Super Bowl. That scares the shit out of me. And typically, I would say the Seahawks, because of Russell Wilson and his ability to extend plays. He's been doing less and less of that. I don't think he wants to be known as a running passer. Even, I don't think that's a bad thing. It's 2019. It's not Michael Vick era. I will comment on your Rodgers comment in a second. Tanks, I agree with you. But the 49ers, I would say it's the 49ers. To me, the team I want to face the least in the NFC, and that's because it's such an unknown to me. First of all, we've played the Saints in recent years. That could also backfire. Beating a team twice in one season statistically is always really hard to do. Like if you're evenly matched, or even if you're not. The coaches, you learn so much about the other team, and these guys are good at what they do, even the worst coaches. But that unknown to me scares me. Beyond that, I just think Zimmer won't have this. And I almost guarantee you he doesn't even have a computer on his desk. It's all like file cabinets and medieval scrolls, and like a monocle for his one good eye. So you don't have that cache of information, and you're from a coaching standpoint or the players. But beyond that, the 49ers have really been battle tested. And they've played every good team, and they've lost by 3 points to the Seahawks, 3 points to the Ravens. They won, I guess, by 3 points over the Saints. These are very close games, but the Vikings are going to go into the playoffs having played a bunch of bad teams for the most part. I include the Packers in that. Wink. I mean, they're not a bad team. I just don't think they're super elite. But at the same time, the Vikings showed in the Seahawks game that they are an elite team. They should have beat the Seahawks. I mean, to have a quarter go that badly, it's almost like they were doing it on purpose. It went bad in almost every way you could think. Another interception off of Diggs' helmet. A play in which Cook fumbles, gets injured, leaves the game, and Diggs gets injured. I've had nightmares that go better than that. That play, granted, it didn't end up really impacting things long term, but for a second there, man, oh man, I don't know if Hot Mic records or keeps the videos or the commentary that we do, but that was rough. yeah, there's that. I think that they're going to be really hard to beat at home. I think that they're very balanced. I think that, again, they've played everybody and they've done a really good job. So, um, you put a gun to my head right now. My Super Bowl, and I would like to see if what your guys' Super Bowl picks are. Let's just remove the Vikings from it because everyone's biased, and I don't want people to say, well, the Vikings, because they know this is a Vikings site or whatever. So if the Vikings aren't in it, who is your Super Bowl teams and who wins it? I would say it's going to be Ravens and Niners, and I would say the Ravens win, but it'll be a really good game. That would be my pick. RN asks if Tang is afraid of the Packers in Lambeau as the first game of the postseason. I would love that game. I want that game. Outside of the alternative, for sure. Again, going back to the familiarity, and tying in Tang's comment, Rodgers does not deserve to be in the MVP contest at all. It's almost like how Dak was up until 2 weeks ago. Everyone, when I wrote the MVP article and saying that no, Cousins is not the MVP. Can we stop talking about that and at least give him some credit? Because people essentially, in arguing that he wasn't the MVP, was implying that he's a sack of garbage with a jugs machine attached to it, launching balls down the field with boots and fish skeletons like Heathcliff's intro. It's not all or nothing. It's not either you're the MVP or you suck. So I was glad that, Lamar Jackson had that sewn up, but I don't see it's name recognition and record. I understand, especially with the MVP and stuff like that, or Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame's a little different, but when it comes to the MVP, the guys that vote on these things don't watch every game. It'd be impossible to. Nobody can know everything about, nobody outside of guys that are paid for gambling purposes. I would presume that these national guys maybe watch 4 or 5 games a week tops. And so they make assumptions or presumptions rather, because it is based on information and it's based on their experiences, but they think, okay, what teams have good records? What teams have quote unquote elite quarterbacks? What teams don't have a ton outside of that guy? Obviously, the argument against Cousins, or at least one of them, was Dalvin Cook, right? You could say, well, he's got a ton of help for Dalvin Cook. And also, when you have 2 guys on one team, it kind of splits the vote in that regard, either the literal votes or the vote in someone's head. So, you look at Rodgers and what he's done, what the team has done, rather, what their record is. I'm not saying that he hasn't had a really good bounce back year. I mean, last year was the worst year of his career, and the LaFleur's brought in a very Kubiakian system, and the team has benefited from that fresh blood. I think Rodgers hated McCarthy at the end and Ted Thompson, and I think that feeling was very mutual. And they won a string of games without Devontae Adams, and they don't have really any wide receiver depth. And then sure, they have a good pair of running backs, but it's not the same thing as the Vikings or the Saints. In that they don't have what the Vikings or the Saints have in the skill positions. I mean, it's just it seems more like he's doing it on his own than Cousins or Breeze is. It feels more like Tom Brady, which isn't a great example because of how bad their offense has been. But back to what RN said, I would, if I had to pick a first round game, I would pick the Packers game. From a business standpoint, it would be amazing. I mean, we would get a ton of traffic, but we have the familiarity there. Someone being murdered upstairs and or dismembered. We have the fact that the Vikings essentially shut them out for 3 quarters earlier this season. Now they're a completely different animal. I don't want to get too confident. They were 2 weeks into a system that was brand new, and Rodgers didn't play a single snap in the preseason, so that was his 5th quarter running a brand new system, the only new system he's run in his career. So I'm not being naive either, but I mean, if the options are going to Seattle again versus Lambeau, because it's not going to be the Saints, it's not going to be the 49ers. They want. I mean, I think they're still only a game ahead of the Seahawks, but I'm pretty sure they'll be all right. They have some softer games coming up as well. So yeah, I mean, I guess I would take Lambeau if I had to. The question is, I'm seeing people writing about Brady leaving New England after the season. I cannot imagine that would happen. I think he knows what he's got, and he's just trying to add more rings to his resume before he retires, and that he why would he go somewhere else? Although it would be amazing if we would have ended up with him as opposed to Cousins. All right, what game are you talking about that we gave away? I just feel like they're doing this intentionally. Well, you know what? I'm gonna let you guys go. With that, I apologize for the sound. Basement apartment, so sometimes how's that saying go? Them's the breaks. I appreciate you guys stopping by. I will be back tomorrow to talk more about the fun win. Keep an eye on VikingsTerritory.com and purplePTSD.com for all of your Vikings content this week. And remember that those Don't Get Too Cute shirts are available on the merch store. So if you want to grab a one-of-a-kind shirt, literally, because you'll be the only one that has it, stop by either site and click on shirts. Of course, now they're done. But I love chatting with you guys about the team. I agree with you, RN. That first Green Bay game, ugh. I think your brain kind of works like me a little bit in that when the Vikings win, like today, I get relieved, and then I think, man, we should have won that fucking Seahawks game, you know? I don't let myself be happy. I just think, man, this team, I mean, think about it. This team could, or I would argue should be, this number 1 seed in the NFC. Packers game, should have won that one. You can say what you want about the Bears. I'll say that's a loss because even though Trubisky didn't play, the defense really owned our offensive line. And Dalvin, I mean, the Green Bay game, you had Dalvin Cook being a monster. The Bears game, you didn't have any of that. Beyond that, you have the Chiefs game. Should have won that one. The Seahawks game, you could have or / should have won that game. Again, them's breaks. You just see how close all of this is, and the difference between that and being the 6th seed is obvious. It's palpable. It's okay. Now they're gonna have to win on the road 3 weeks in a row, as opposed to playing at home where they have been undefeated for God knows how long, and by God I mean Google. So, I think they should have won at least 2 of those games. Tang, he said it. They got too cute. I agree. I agree with you, man. That's the best way to leave it. Again, I have a great time chatting with you guys. I can't wait for the playoffs to start and to see where this takes us. But thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you guys tomorrow. If you haven't subscribed, please do that. And Skol.